We have to put the visit of the foreign minister of Turkey to the United States in a proper context. First things first, Russia and the United States are racing over greater influence and leverage over Turkey. On one hand, Russia is encouraging Russia to become an energy hub and strike gas deals with Turkey so that Turkey can become an energy hub, and through Turkey, Russia can also transfer gas to other regions. On the other hand, the United States is persuading Turkey to buy the F-16 fighter jets, or persuading Turkey through selling these F-16 fighter jets to Turkey to give Turkey also a yellow or green light to further invade northern Syria, to keep Idlib under its control through the proxies of Turkey. However, it seems that Turkey scaled back or scaled down in its intention to buy the F-35 fighter jets because, first of all, the F-35 fighter jets are having more opposition in the United States from congressmen and congresswomen and other politicians, senior politicians, and especially in the deep state or the permanent states of the United States. Secondly, these fighter jets one piece costs $100 million. And thirdly, these fighter jets suffer from endless bugs, endless technical problems. For example, only last week, Bloomberg, for example, reported that these F-35 fighter jets, they suffer from steel coating, sustained supersonic flight, helmet-mounted display, excessive vibration from its cannon, even vulnerability for being hit by lightning. So this case is very complicated for both sides. It seems that the United States cannot really promote and market its product well to the outside world. On the other hand, also Turkey isn't very interested in buying a product that costs a lot, and the value in the market, on the operational value of it, is not as bigger than the F-16. So F-16 would be a good deal for Turkey if Turkey was able to convince the American politicians in order to sell them these fighter jets. Turkey's national interest or strategic interest lies in having a balanced relations between Moscow and Washington at the same time, because Ankara wants to benefit from the incentives of both sides. From Russia, for example, Turkey wants to have better trade deals, also improved gas deals through the Turk Stream, in order to convert Turkey into an energy hub that will also have its positive reflections on the economy of Turkey that is suffering from blowbacks for almost a decade now. On the other hand, also, Ankara wants to benefit from the incentives of Washington. For example, they want to play a mediator role in Ukraine, and at the same time, they want to keep the leverage of Turkey over northern Syria and probably also in Europe by also blackmailing Sweden and Finland's their candidacy to become a NATO member state. For example, Turkey, in my opinion, doesn't really mind much for Sweden and Finland to join NATO as long as these countries present incentives for Turkey. Turkey doesn't want to give a carte blanche for these countries without something in exchange, and this something should be tangible. For example, trade deals with the European Union, increasing economic relations with the European Union as well, and also to hand over certain figures, for example, from Finland and Sweden, those who are accused by Turkey of being terrorists, or, let's be honest, the Kurdish personnel or figures that Turkey wants them to be handed over to it. And therefore, Turkey is playing on both sides to get the benefits from Washington and Moscow at the same time in order to pursue its national interests. And I think that is logical approach. If we compare it to other regions, for example, the European Union has become like as if one bloc against Russia and embedded with Washington. The Far East Asian countries, for example, South Korea, the Philippines, and even Japan are increasingly becoming a satellite state for Washington. Turkey doesn't want to be like these countries and have a periphery for maneuvering in order to pursue its national interests. If I want to answer this question with one word, I would say election. We know that this year there is going to be general elections in Turkey, and Erdogan wants to encourage the people in Turkey to vote for him. And how can he do that? All the political parties in Turkey are encouraging their fan base to go and vote based on three major files. One is the refugee crisis. We have over 3.5 million refugees from Syria in Turkey, and all the political parties agree that these refugees should go back to Syria. Second is the issue of the Kurdish militias on the borders with Turkey, and all political parties in Turkey agree that they have to be pushed at least 30 kilometers away from the borders. And three, they want to establish stability in the region. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned, is because Turkey wants to convert its country into an energy hub. And if there is an energy hub in Turkey, that means there are different energy and gas pipelines passing through Turkey. Turkey needs stability in order to become an energy hub. So it's in the interest of Turkey to restore stability in the region, despite the fact that in the past 10 years or a decade after the so-called Arab Spring, Turkey played a destructive role in Syria and destabilized the region. But now the interests of Turkey forces Erdogan to open ties with Syria. And on the other side of the border in Syria, they don't mind claiming back or welcoming the refugees back to Syria and push the Kurdish militias 30 kilometers away from the border, but with preconditions. These preconditions are that Turkey has to withdraw from the Syrian territories, should resolve the issue of the jihadists in Idlib, and stop supporting the multinational jihadists or other radical groups in Syria. If these preconditions are met from the Turkish side, I think a peace deal is possible between the both sides. Peace deal between Syria and Turkey are possible, and they are possible in 2023, even before the election in Turkey. However, a meeting between Assad and Erdogan, in my opinion, is not yet possible, because my sources in Syria say that the preconditions of Syria cannot be met before the general election in Syria, and the preconditions of Syria are clear. One, Turkey must commit itself to withdraw all its occupation forces from Syria. And two, Turkey has to stop supporting the anti-government forces, whether they're armed or political groups. And three, they have to solve the issue of the multinational jihadists and overall the jihadist scene in Idlib and open the M4 highway. So if these demands are met, I think the peace deal is possible. However, as I mentioned, the sources in Damascus say it is early for a meeting between Assad and Erdogan. However, a meeting between the foreign ministers of Syria and Turkey, in my opinion, is very soon. It's going to happen, probably in Sochi or in the United Arab Emirates, who is also playing a mediator role or trying to solve the complex conflicts in the Middle East with Syria, with Iran, with Turkey. It seems that the United Arab Emirates is also playing a positive role in this regard, and I think the meeting between Çavuşoğlu and Faisal Muqdad is in the coming few weeks and even before the elections in Turkey. One of the main reasons for the prolonged war in Syria, the acts of hostilities, is the media coverage. The media coverage in Syria was very negative, very much destructive, and played a destructive role in Syria. And the United States, the UK, France, and other regional countries supported lots of media outlets that they called them unbiased, quote unquote. However, these media outlets were basically encouraging and promoting the ideas that they're going to overthrow the government in Syria, whether through protests or through other means such as using force or military force. Now, since there is going to be a peace deal between Turkey and Syria, the biggest, in my opinion, the most influential media outlets that are working day and night against keeping some segments of the Syrian people alarmed against the government, they are located in Turkey. So if a peace deal has been struck between Syria and Turkey, I think these media outlets will suffer from lack of financing and lack of funds, and therefore they will close their offices. That's why the United States, or the State Department of the United States, they allocated $15 million, this was only last week, to finance the media outlets that they call unbiased. And we all know what this does mean. They are pro-American media outlets. They are operated by Syrians. However, the goal of these media outlets is to prolong the war in Syria, or if Turkey and Syria agree and they end the conflict in northern Syria or in Idlib, in order to prolong any sort of dissent against the Syrian government, even if there is no acts of hostilities between the both sides, just like the case of the Cubans, for example, in the United States, or the Iranian exiles, those who continue protesting against the government, thanks to also, I would say, media outlets who broadcast content that keeps the people alarmed against the government, because this is a long-term project, and I don't think the United States is ready to give up on Syria yet. I think the chances of Erdogan and other candidates and other political parties are 50-50. However, since the failed coup d'etat in 2016 against Erdogan, which believed to be was engineered by the CIA, Erdogan has now an absolute power over the media in Turkey, has an absolute power over the police, has an absolute power over the army, and most importantly, over the business circles and the security circles in Turkey. Therefore, in my opinion, the objective opinion of the Turkish voters is important, but what is also important is Erdogan's ability and capability to persuade the voters to vote for him through a soft power. And this is, in my opinion, how Erdogan he can practice hegemony over the people in Turkey. And this is a similar case in Europe. There is a freedom of speech, quote unquote, for example, in Europe, but the governments are able to practice hegemony over the people and convince the people to vote certain political parties without telling them to vote for these political parties. And this happens basically through the media, through these media outlets, through the non-governmental organizations, and any other means that these figures can use as a soft power against the people in order to encourage them to vote for him or her. Therefore, in my opinion, Erdogan, although technically he has a 50-50 chance, but he definitely has an upper hand because of this background, the context, that he has a very big influence and leverage over the circles of power in Turkey, mainly media, business, and security sectors. In my opinion, there is an emotional or social aspect in this. Erdogan is a very clever leader, and since he ascended power, he managed to manipulate lots of people, especially in the Arab world. Tens of millions of people outside of Turkey, they believe in Erdogan, they believe in his cause, and they support him. And this is not a coincidence. Erdogan, for example, can steer the feelings, the emotions of the people, especially in the Islamic world, by claiming that he is, at the moment, he doesn't want Sweden and Finland to join NATO because he claims that he is against NATO, although Turkey itself is a NATO country. For example, Erdogan claimed that he is championing the Palestinian cause, but at the same time he was doing business deals with Israel, and now they normalized the relations again. So in Syria, for example, he claimed to be the caliph of the Muslims there. Therefore, he wants to come to Syria as a liberator. He wants to pray in the Umayyad mosque in Damascus. This is what he said. So this is, in my opinion, more meant for emotional mobilization of his fan base rather than being an actual policy that he wants to pursue towards, for example, Sweden and Finland. And as I mentioned before, if Sweden and Finland agree on the preconditions of Turkey and they strike a comprehensive deal with Turkey and help the recovery of the economy in Turkey, I don't think Erdogan or the leadership in Turkey would mind that Sweden and Finland to join NATO. And even on the Russian side, some people say that Russia doesn't want for Finland and Sweden to join the NATO. That is technically true. But if we remember what Putin said about these countries, he mentioned a big historical background. He mentioned that he doesn't mind for Sweden and Finland to join NATO because they don't pose threat to the national security of Russia. However, Ukraine was a different case, and we know that NATO was trying to create a satellite state, a NATO satellite state, a de facto NATO state in Ukraine in order to project its power through 4 bridges, and that are France, Germany, Poland, and then Ukraine. And by doing so, the United States can project its hegemony inside of Russia and can destabilize the internal affairs of Russia. And that's when Russia decided to launch its offensive against Ukraine to protect its national interest. Therefore, some people say Turkey doesn't want Sweden to or Finland to join NATO because they don't want to anger Russia, and I think that's not the case. I think the basic headlines for the Iranian nuclear deal is being agreed upon between the both sides or the multiple sides. Iran doesn't mind to join back or to go back to the nuclear deal. The real problem lies in three other reasons. One, the Biden administration wants to add new clauses, new articles to the nuclear deal. And one of them is the long-range ballistic missile program of Iran. Secondly, the drone program, especially the kamikaze ones that Iran is also selling now to Russia, to Syria, to Lebanon, etc. And most importantly, the European Union and the United States are concerned over the growing influence of Iran in the region as a whole, for example, through the gate of Yemen, through the gate of Lebanon, in Iraq, in Syria, etc. So, on this particular point, we have to understand that these concerns are also coming from Israel. Israel is the one lobbying in Washington, lobbying in Brussels, so that first they abandon the nuclear deal because they don't want the recovery of the economy in Iran, and secondly, they want to curb the influence of Iran in the region. Therefore, they're trying to sabotage it by adding more demands, more conditions in this deal. And I think Iranian side has learned the lesson this time, especially after the withdrawal of Trump from this deal. And secondly, after the Western engineered destabilization attempt only recently in Iran, they tried to cause a big protest against the government through the Women's Rights Gate. And that has, as is mentioned, has failed. However, in my opinion, this has failed for the moment. This has failed at the moment. There is a big possibility that the Western countries could continue in this destabilization attempt in Iran. And as we may know, recently, Iran has executed its former Deputy Defense Minister, which was proved to be an MI6 agent. So we have to know that these countries have their own infiltrators and agents in the Iranian regime in order to not only destabilize it, but prepare the grounds to replace this ruling regime with another ruling regime which is pro the United States and pro the West, which was the case before 1979. The withdrawal of the American forces from the Middle East or decreasing the number of troops or influence in the region is a good news for the Middle East, in my opinion, because let's remember, in the past 100 years, all these wars and destabilization happened in the region, first after World War I, because the colonizers, the French and the Brits, they divided the countries in the Middle East and they created their regions of influence. And later, Britain created Israel in Palestine. And later we see all this Arab-Israeli conflict because of that. And then there was the Carter Doctrine, for example. So the United States would use any military force or military means possible to protect its energy interests in the region, and especially in the Gulf Arab countries. However, recently, because the United States doesn't really rely a lot nowadays on the energy of Saudi Arabia or other Gulf state countries, because it's now self-sufficient and it's even selling its own natural liquid gas to Europe, the United States doesn't have the interest to invest big military power in the region to protect its interests. And also, let's remember that the priority of the United States is shifting nowadays from the Middle East into Central Asia or Eurasia as a whole, and in Ukraine in particular. And this happened, remember, just after the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So this was planned. They planned to withdraw from Afghanistan and focus on Eastern Europe or on Eurasia against Russia, but at the same time on Far East Asia against China. And nowadays we can see that the highest Lieutenant General of the United States in Japan, he said that they are preparing, quote unquote, the theater in Japan similar to the same theater that they created in Ukraine in preparation for a long war against China in order to quote-unquote defend Taiwan. So I suspect that even before the end of the hostilities in Ukraine, we will see another tensions happening in Far East Asia, and we will see the participation of the Philippines, the Japan on the side of the United States. So we can see there is one strategy in two different regions. In Europe, the United States managed to bring all these so-called allies as a one bloc, as if they don't have any differences of opinion or national interest, etc., as a one bloc against Russia through the gate of Ukraine. And now the United States is doing the same in Far East Asia, is bringing the countries that are neighboring countries of China, especially the Philippines, the Japan, South Korea, as a one bloc and alarming them against China. So this is the strategy of the United States that is going to be translated soon into a military conflict, and I'm not sure that humanity is ready yet for such a conflict. The United States probably wants to establish a base in Morocco. However, judging from the experience of the Middle East, the United States doesn't have much to present to this country, especially in Africa. They don't have a great economic model that they can give incentives to these countries in order for these countries to solve their own economic and social problems. What the United States or the neoliberal political regime in the United States can present is only ideology, which is empty from any meaningful tools that can improve the living standards of the people in these countries. They can give them gender ideology, identity politics, and all this neoliberal crap that doesn't fit anyone, neither in the Middle East nor in Africa. However, on the other side, as we can see, and if we compare the situation, for example, in Turkey, what Russia is trying to do to Turkey is to help them solve their economic problems through the gas deals. What is the United States is trying to do? Selling them more weapons. So this is the difference of approach between, in my opinion, Russia and the United States, and therefore, increasing number of countries, especially in the southern countries, in Africa, in the Middle East, in India, in Pakistan, all these countries, they feel like they want to have better relations with Russia because Russia is giving back incentives, improving the living standards in these countries, and it is not coming as a colonizer. It is not coming as a country that wants to impose its own values, its way of life, its own so-called democracy on the rest of the world. So, in my opinion, the so-called international community that the United States keeps telling, no, they are just like probably 50 countries. The rest of 130 countries or 140 countries, they have had enough of the United States telling them how to live, how to act, and how to manage their own affairs. Therefore, Russia is presenting itself as an alternative model, and the rest of the world is excited about that because they have had enough of the American arrogance and American hegemony over their affairs.